We now have a pleasure of bringing up amazing leaders with different perspectives and expertise. I'm going to first introduce our moderator and let her call up her panelists, but Shital Shah is a senior advisor for strategic partnerships, but it's actually a very correct title, because I don't know anyone who's more strategic and better at partnering than Shital, and I've had the honor, our team's had the honor of working with her and her team, especially around the Engage Every Student initiative. We'll tell you more, but that was a vision set by Secretary Cardona, who will be with us tomorrow. But she has been helping our country get pulled together around how could we use summer learning and after-school programs to reach every student. And Shital, I must just say, your commitment is just so admirable. It's amazing. Please come up here and be our wonderful moderator. Please welcome Shital Shah.
Good evening, everyone. So, Becky, I think we can follow your act, but it's going to take five of us to do so. So I'm going to call our panelists up, and I will sit all the way over there. So if y'all can fill in these 4 rows. Dr. Thomas Kane, who's a professor of education at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. Yes, please. Suzanne McCormick, President and CEO of the YMCA of the USA. Rey Saldaña, President and CEO of Communities and Schools. And last but not least, Dr. David Schuler, Executive of AASA, Superintendents Association. All right, so now that we're all settled and are super energized, thank you, Becky. The course of the very quick conversation, but most of us will be around after, so we welcome any questions and conversations after. We're gonna lay the landscape for you first, and then dig into partnerships, because as Becky and Aaron just reiterated one after another, partnerships is why we're here, and what's going to sustain our work and really having an equitable impact for all of our students across the country. So, Dr. Kane, I'm going to start with you. Based on your research and what you're seeing, what role does summer or could summer play, and is summer learning playing in COVID recovery?
So, thanks, Shital. And I'm going to argue that unless there's a dramatic expansion of summer learning next summer and then continued in future summers, that U.S. students will not be able to recover from the pandemic, and that the work that you're doing is essential to the recovery. And let me make that argument. The first point is just getting a much more realistic sense of the magnitude of students' losses. I think we have not done a good job of just helping people understand just what it's going to take to recover, because losses were reported in terms of, a few percentage points on the state, proficiency, and it's hard to convert that into a recovery effort. So I teamed up with Sean Reardon at Stanford to create this website, the Education Recovery Scorecard, where we took each of the state's assessments and we converted it into months of learning or grade equivalents. And so I'd encourage you to go to that website to look up your losses and just to see the losses reported in terms of grade equivalents. I looked at the list of participants here at the conference, so I went to the report card and loaded up some of the losses district by district. You can see there are 4 groups of districts. There's Poteau, Oklahoma, Elk City, Oklahoma, Charleston, South Carolina, 3 districts that saw relatively modest losses during the pandemic. But then there's another group of districts, Portland, Oregon, Wake County in North Carolina, Tuscaloosa City in Alabama, that saw losses more like about a half a year's worth of learning, which is about what the national average was. But then there are 2 other groups of districts represented here and around the country that saw much larger losses. And they weren't just high poverty districts. So, Howard County, Maryland, Philadelphia, Boston, Pittsburgh, all lost, close to a year's worth of learning in math. And there are a few other districts, Newark, Tulsa, Baltimore City, St. Louis, who lost way more than a year, so closer to a year and a half. Now, I've been looking for ways to just summarize what is it going to take to recover from losses that large, and this next slide is my attempt to try to do that. So I've converted the pre-pandemic research on the efficacy of these different interventions into the same units, grade equivalent units. So high dosage tutoring that many of you have heard about. The pre-pandemic research suggested providing a tutor 3 times a week in groups of 3 or fewer students, 3 times a week for a whole school year, so 108 sessions. Doing that would generate the equivalent of about a year's worth of learning. Double dose math. There was a number of high quality studies before the pandemic, especially in Algebra 1, suggested you'd get about a half a year's worth of growth by providing a second period of math instruction to students. And then summer school, or summer learning, providing 6 weeks of about 90 minutes per session for the summer produces the equivalent of about a quarter of a year. Actually, that totally makes sense, because 6 weeks is 1/6 of a typical 36-week school year. And if it's 90 minutes of instruction, that's more than a typical school day of an hour. So you do the multiplication and it works out to about equivalent to about a quarter of a school year from summer learning, and that's what the research suggests. Now, here's the part that no school districts, or very few school districts have done, is they've take these estimates and multiply them by the percentage of students being served. So here I just worked out an example. What would it take to make up for even a half a year? So not a year or a year and a half. Remember, there were a bunch of districts that were in a year and a half. If we just ask, what would it take to make up for half a year? And here's the answer. You could provide high dosage tutoring to 10% of students. Now, most school districts haven't come anywhere close to high dosage tutoring. Instead of 100 sessions, they've been able to do like 20 sessions per year. It's still something, but not enough. Double dose math. Suppose we provided double dose math to 30% of students. Do the multiplication, 30%, 0.3 times half a year gives you a 0.15 years growth for the district as a whole. Now let's add summer learning for, say, a quarter of a year, but suppose we did it for 75% of students instead of, 10 or 15 or 20%, which is much more common. If you add all of those up and you extended the school year by 2.5 weeks, if you did all of that, you would generate about a half a year's worth of growth. If you were a district like, St. Louis, you'd have to do this 3 years in a row. And as you know, most school districts haven't done anywhere near this magnitude of effect. So it may be disappointing that the 2023 test results are coming back and students are still behind, but it shouldn't be surprising. It's a direct result of the magnitude of the effort districts have been able to field so far. And so I hope that the summer of 24, summer is the most unequal time of year educationally in the U.S. And I hope in the summer of 24 we can see dramatically expanded summer learning programs. And I hope that states figure out ways to finance that and support that going forward, even beyond the end of next summer when the federal dollars run out.
Great, thank you so much, Dr. Kane. And summer is, yes, it's a point in time during our 365 days of the year, but it is also one of the most important times in terms of the space it allows us to innovate, to collaborate outside of what we may normally be doing during the rest of the school year, right? It offers our educators an opportunity and our community-based organizations time to connect and shape something that's transformative for our young people. I'm going to move on to David. David, we've just heard about the investments, what investments can do. What are you seeing school districts investing in terms of summer programming?
Yeah, so we've been doing a survey of the use of ARP funds since 2021. And the number one response from superintendents, hands down, has been creating whole systems of support for our students. And I think what's super important it's important for me to say, is I think the students that we're serving are different than the students we served before COVID. And as a result, our interventions and our systems of support have to look different. We can't continue to do things the way we've always done them because our kiddos are different. Our learners need something more. We have more and more kids that aren't showing up. And if they don't show up, they can't take a test, right? But they're not showing up necessarily because they don't want to show up. They may not be able to show up. And so the actions and the supports that we provide in summer and during the school year, specifically for this conversation in summer, have to be different. We have to go out to our students instead of expecting them always to come to us. That's why partnerships are so important with community and schools and the Y, with our teacher associations, so that we're all working together to provide those learning opportunities for kids. But what we see our superintendents looking for innovative partnerships and ways that are different from the traditional 6-week summer school program or 2-3-week sessions. We're looking for ways, and we're looking for ideas, and you're the experts. That's what you do. That's what this learning opportunity, as Becky mentioned earlier, is about. Bring creative ideas to your school system leaders. They are willing and very interested in doing whatever they can to support every student. The second thing that that our superintendents have told us from a research perspective that they used their ARP dollars for was providing additional specialist support. So psychologists, social worker, guidance counselors. That need is more than it has ever been in the history of our country. And guess what? There's no one out there. We would all love to be hiring more specialists if we could find them. Because our kids need it, and not only our kids. Our adults need that support as well. And the third is infrastructure, being able to update our school facilities because the local dollars aren't always there. But I find it really interesting that our superintendent leaders who care so much about our teachers and our students are focused on whole systems of support and providing additional specialist services. And that's what we're looking for partners in that work to do, so we can teach our students where they're at and then take them on an incredible acceleration ride. Right? Our job is to find ways to teach our students in their zone of development, their proximal zone of development. If a kid gets 1 to 13 wrong, why are they doing 15 to 74? If a kid gets 1 to 13 right, why are we asking them to do 15 to 34? Right? Teach them where they're at and take them on an acceleration ride. And that's what I think is so special about the work of a summer learning, the association in summer learning. You can create ways to create opportunities for students where they're at and take them to places they never dreamed possible.
Thank you, David. And I would add to that, how are we engaging students and helping create
Absolutely.
the opportunities they want to be possible for them, right? And so moving on to partnerships that David was just mentioning. Suzanne, what is your perspective in terms of the YMCA that you're seeing change or has changed in the national landscape of engaging youth?
Well, I'll build on your second theme, David, and since I've been in my role, which has been about 2 years now, spending an incredible amount of time visiting YMCAs around the country, one of the number one concerns or issues that is being talked about and has been raised is in the area of mental well-being and mental health, not only for the kids and the young people that we serve, but also the staff and the professionals that are supporting them. So what you said absolutely resonates. So many of my visits this summer to summer camp, the conversation centered around how our resident camps and our day camps, for example, are having to bring in outside expertise to support their staff with their own mental health and well-being so that they can support the children and the young people that they are working with, and also bringing in professionals to work directly with kids. I think if you had met a YMCA professional 5 years ago or 6 years ago, while mental well-being would have definitely been on the radar, it wouldn't have been a flashing headline on the radar in the way that it is today. And so we at YMCA are actually looking to add resources to our national staff so that we are better equipped to serve our YMCAs around the country in their ability to do that. So that definitely it's a concern. It's living out in all of our worlds. But I do want to end on a bright spot too. That's anecdotal, but also share a little bit of positive, optimistic data, because I am definitely a glass half full kind of gal. Recently I want to give a shout out to our national partners at Boys and Girls Club of America. Their fairly recently released data report on Youth Right Now, which is a survey they do of young people aged 9 to 18. And it asks them about how they're feeling about their emotional well-being, their academics, their relationships, their readiness for life post-high school, and then also social issues impacting society. And while 7 out of 10 kids, admit that they get really stressed often and that they want to keep that a secret, there also is a huge percentage of our young people, 81% of that data group, feels positive about their ability to make an impact positively on society. And so even in the darkness right now, they are seeing their own agency in being able to change their future. And that definitely gives me hope, and we need it.
Thank you, Suzanne, for that. Rey, moving on to you. In terms of partnerships, Communities in Schools is known nationwide for really working inside schools in collaboration with the students and educators and other school staff, and also pulling together outside partners to really wrap around the school those supports and opportunities that our young people and families need. What have you seen change in terms of partnerships, right? Pre-pandemic and now and moving forward. And what is getting more intricate and sophisticated about the way we are able to work together?
Well, first of all, Shital, thank you for the question and for the moderation, but I want to take just a point of personal privilege to thank again President of NEA, Becky Pringle, for the sermon and the energy. And I just think also just the point that I took from one of the things that she said that I think we want to hold on to, not only that we want to hold and take home, I'll hold and take home this idea of creating partnerships, creating programs and opportunities that are worthy of our students. I heard you use that term. And I think for us at Communities in Schools, and I'll briefly describe what we do at Communities in Schools. I've had the opportunity to lead the organization now for the last 3 years, but I'm also a product of the program. I'm an alum of Communities in Schools through CIS, which means that I had a relationship with a school-based psych coordinator. Her name was Miss Reyes. Miss Reyes' job as a psych coordinator is to try to make sense of all of the things that happen not only in a child's life and build a relationship with them, but to connect that student with all of the resources that oftentimes it takes a Ph.D. to understand and navigate systems to connect, whether that is housing assistance or utility assistance or connection to the food bank, or maybe there was a traumatic event that happened and you needed access to mental health. The psych coordinator really is there to connect with the student. We have 4,000 all across the U.S. now, Mrs. Reyes and otherwise. But to your question, what has changed now in this environment is I'll just give you the kind of example of what a Miss Reyes does in school and also in summer that is very hard to do. It's not complicated, but it is hard, and this is the part that has changed, which is the amount of just the gap in trust for what students will and how they do approach an adult who says that we are here to help. They have these antennas for really sifting out if this person is really truly there to help me, to help build a relationship. And so back to this point of building systems that are worthy of our children, we also need to understand that students have an incredible amount of worth. And I think what has changed is nonprofits like the YMCA and the Boys and Girls Club, researchers, philanthropy. I think we understand much more this innate power that students and their communities have and their families have, that we're adopting a new approach to how many times we have to do outreach and connection. And so if I were to tell you the journey of the young people that we work with, either in the summer or in the school year, it isn't enough to ask a student as he's passing through the hallway how they're doing, or even to set up a one-on-one session with many of them. What has changed is the antenna they have to try to really break through. And many of our site coordinators who, we're in 34 states and 3,000 schools at this point, talk about the level of trust and how much more that distance of the gap is when you want to connect a student to resources, when you want to make sure that they are being forthcoming about the episodes and the trauma that's in life. But I think that has really allowed us as nonprofit, community-based organizations to understand how we create programs that are worthy of our students. And as we all understand, if we want to get students turned on to learning, something that the professor has talked about, they need to be turned on to living. And living is sometimes the hardest part for many of our young people. And it really is the people power that we put into the programs, the supports, the superintendents that are building these relationships in an environment where that gap has changed in the level of trust that young people have for adults who are trying to come in. And I think that's the effort that we're all in. At the end of the day, it's not programs that are changing young people's lives, it's relationships. And that's at the center of what I think a lot of the work that we're trying to get done in this new time.
Thank you, Rey. So, Suzanne, really quickly, relationships, right? That is fundamental to any lasting partnership. Why partner? What's the value proposition for the National YMCA? And how can we help other, not just national organizations who have local affiliates, but those community-based organizations, those grassroots-based organizations who may be trying to partner as well with a school district or another larger organization?
I always say the biggest deterrent to partnership is ego. And I feel like if we had more humility in our leadership at all levels, we would all be better partners. That's just one of my soapbox kind of things. But partnership our leaders across the Y movement will hear me say that partnership building is, I think, one of the single most important leadership competencies for the future. And I'm saying that specifically to our Y leaders who have had the benefit through moments of history where they didn't really need to look outside the walls of their Ys to achieve their mission. And yet, for all the reasons that you just described, Rey, about the fact that kids show up in school with life all around them and that we can't be singly focused if we're really about whole person health. And we are at the YMCA, we're about mind, body, and spirit. And so partnerships have become increasingly important to us because in the same way that kids show up at school with everything about life, they show up in the Y in the same way. And so our ability to have additional resources through partnerships available for them is becoming more and more important. And the Ys that I am seeing be the most successful and really positioning themselves for the future are the Ys that have embraced this notion that we will do some things really well and then we will bring in partners to do other things really well in order to serve the kids and their families. One of my favorite examples, and I was just sharing this with Becky, is our YMCA in Birmingham, Alabama has an old building in a traditionally underinvested neighborhood of Birmingham called Roebuck, and they have just broken ground on a refurbishment of that YMCA, and it will be specifically focused on early child development and after-school care for kids, because that's their niche in this neighborhood. And they are pulling in to co-locate a healthcare provider, mental health providers, and other community-based organizations, food pantries. So they're creating, beyond some traditional Y programming, a much more holistic set of resources for families. And one of my favorite parts about this is that they gave a parcel of their property to Habitat for Humanity, which is now building 22 single-family homes. So they are really put themselves at the center of recreating community. And that's what partnership can do.
No, thank you for sharing that really illustrative example and what we should be doing more of. And David, now going back to superintendents and district leaders, how can we help? I mean, at the federal level, we hear often from advocates and practitioners that sometimes it's a little difficult or challenging to begin a partnership with school districts, right? But we know that school districts are benefiting and want to, most all of the time, find community-based organizations and nonprofits to work with, right? And that's where the best work is happening. How do we help those other superintendents really prioritize these partnerships, and specifically around summer learning?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I would offer two thoughts for that. One, I think come with a plan that has impact, right? So have a plan that and indicate in that plan what the demonstrated impact you believe that plan will have. Everything's an action research project. We're not going to expect everything to be perfect. Like, we get that. But to be completely honest, until COVID hit, summer learning was not the highest priority for most superintendents. It should have been. I'm not saying it should not have been, but it wasn't. That's just the reality. And so we're not all experts in that space, which is why we need help with the plan. But when the plan is developed, one of the things we try really hard to focus on is how are we ensuring our students are college, career, and community ready, right? And so we want to make sure that we're thinking about engagement and relevance. So what is that summer experience going to be that provides relevance to that student's pathway of choice, whatever that looks like, along with something that engaged. I think Dr. Kane had in his article, ice cream and broccoli, I think is the way he said it, right? Like something that kids are going to want to show up, while then you're reinforcing the important things as part of it. But, summer learning, it's a great opportunity for internships, for externships, for external work-based learning experiences for students that they may not have time for during the school year, but it's a great opportunity. And so, as we think about, we have two things at AASA. We have a Redefining Ready, which really talks about what it means to be college, career, community ready, more than a score, because we don't believe our students should be reduced down to a single test score. And then number two, we really are thinking about how we ensure that no learner is marginalized, and we're providing these systems of support throughout the community, right? So when we talk about our learners, we don't talk about just our students. We talk about all stakeholders in the community coming together. And some of the challenges superintendents can have is when there are different community associations and organizations, if they're not all rowing the boat in the same direction, it can be a challenge. So working together to align those community resources is something that we're really working hard on, and trying to ensure that when people approach us with ideas, because we have to think through then that lens of how are all the other community organizations going to view this initiative. Most of our superintendents, the answer to that is going to be let's bring them on, but we want to ensure that there's impact, and so it would be greatly beneficial for when approached as a superintendent to have a plan with desired or intended impact.
Yeah, and thank you for underscoring the necessity of alignment, right? And out of the pandemic, we did see many examples across the country. Out of crisis came this alignment because there was this influx of funding, both public and private, to support after school and summer, and we needed to really collaborate and have a cohesive program for our young people. Thank you. Dr. Kane, so what data should we be collecting?
So as I was arguing during my presentation, what we need is not just to preserve the expansion in summer learning that you guys have all helped make happen these last couple years, but to dramatically expand even from there. And to do that expansion, though, citing this pre-pandemic research that I just did is not going to be enough. We're going to need some evidence of the efficacy of your programs. And so here are just 3 simple things that you could do that where you're not hiring a bunch of fancy statisticians like me. This is just stuff you could do in an Excel spreadsheet. Number 1, make sure that your district is tracking which kids are attending summer learning and how long. So that's individual kid data on which kids are attending and how many sessions they're attending. Believe it or not, a lot of districts don't do that, but to be able to say anything later about what was effective about the program, you're going to need that. So that's the first piece. The second is most school districts use some sort of interim assessment, whether it's NWEA MAP or Curriculum Associates iReady or Renaissance Star. It's often one of those 3. But all of those companies will be able to report to you what was students' growth between the spring and the fall. So often there's a spring assessment and then a fall assessment. And then the third thing you need to do is just be able to report what was the average growth for the kids that participated in summer learning versus what was the average growth for the kids that didn't participate. It's not going to be perfect, but it'll be a heck of a lot more informative. And as I said, it is critical that you collect these data, not just because it may be important to your program, because there'll be a lot of finger pointing in a year or so when the $190 billion is spent and kids have not caught up yet. Rather, it'll be important for the whole effort of summer learning to be able to make the case, not just in 1 or 2 places, but in a number of different places, that the kids who participated in summer learning saw faster growth than the kids who didn't. And that'll be the evidentiary record that will really help the field, I think, in a year or so.
Thank you, Dr. Kane. And Rey, really quickly, you shared with us the importance of partnerships and cross-sector collaboration and what we should be doing. What are some pain points in school and community partnerships that you're hearing from across the country?
Well, I hope folks heard the question. It was the question around pain points. And there's a lot of pain points and there's a lot of maybe some battle scars in the room of how to do partnerships. We at community schools have had 45 years in this work, and we, I would say, have done this wrong and in many cases probably done some harm in the way we've approached partnerships or the way folks have approached us about partnerships. And so one thing I'll lay out as a very, who has the power to sort of to direct a partnership coming together? You may say it's the larger organization, the one with most funding. Is it the funders? Is it the legislators? The folks who are going to, of course, research the work, assess, and tell you how the work should be put together. And what is difficult is Suzanne at the YMCA, myself at CIS, or name a nonprofit who's doing work in mental health. Each one of them wants to do what Dr. Kane just described, which is represent data about the work. And to Suzanne's point, all of us maybe want to take credit for that because we've got boards of directors and donors. But I truly think what has changed, again, back to this idea of what is the programs or the support systems we need to create for our students that are worthy of them. It doesn't matter to them who CIS is, that it's a national nonprofit. It doesn't matter if it's YMCA or it's the local mental health service agency that's connected. That they just know they need help. Their students or their families need help. And in that equation, I think it has become difficult. It's a pain point for us to really try to identify how to do this work. But I would say there's a light at the end of this tunnel because I have gotten the chance to visit a lot of communities who are really understanding the importance of community level indicators and great backbone organizations like the Strive Together Network or Place Matters in Dallas or in Memphis. these communities that understand how the transaction works at the county level, the city level, and it really has been, a difficult or evolution to get to this point. But I think when we're focused less on, what can I report about attendance, or what can I report about dropout rate, and what can we report about the impact on a particular zip code or particular family or median income or housing prices or access to traffic at a community-wide level, that data becomes a little more interesting to folks who are at the back end of the policy-making decision, or maybe they're in the funders category. But it is, partnerships at this level are not natural. And I think for a lot of us, that is a pain point, is how to do that in a place that lets go of ego, that lets go of who gets the credit, and truly thinks about the center of, which is the student, the impact, and whether we're creating a system that's worthy of the work. But those have been pain points, but I would say that there's a lot of great work happening with backbone organizations who are really trying to lift up beyond that in some really great cities. And not just urban communities, but some rural communities that are putting that together.
Yeah. Thank you, Ray. And now in our last, we have a minute and a half according to the clock, but I'm going to give each of you about 30 to 45 seconds to share with us one piece of advice you would give to folks out there who are already maybe doing cross-sector partnerships, but what can they do to help us ensure that summer 2024 is as most impactful as we can possibly make it? So David, let's start with you and we'll
be incredibly innovative and think about the interconnectedness between different organizations and groups, and be forward driven. Be forward driven in your work. We are creating the future workforce for a world that does not exist. That is our opportunity, to Becky's point, that we get to do, and let's do it together.
What I would say is that I think we had a quote that opened up. The one quote that comes to mind as I think about advice is that Alice Walker, poet, says that the most common way we give away our power is by thinking that we don't have any. And the advice I would give to folks who are coming into this service, it sometimes feels like students, their families are our clients. You need to let go of that and recognize that if these folks who are part of the advocacy, the voice, the direction of where your organization looks to go, it shouldn't be that these are your customers. These are really part of creating how you transform communities from the inside out and not just from the outside in, because we're an organization that has funding for 2 years and we have to prove our worth. It's important for us just to recognize and keep that centered, that we don't have a short-term memory about the issues around justice or the issues around inequity, because I think that's the enemy to progress here, is a short-term memory, is how we think about this work and how it will ultimately last into the future.
I would add something we haven't talked that much about, but that old adage, nothing about us without us, and that so much of the solutions about how to get better at this work lie with our young people, and how do we bring their voice into this. I have just recently formed a youth advisory council so that I could model what I believe others should do, and they are some of the smartest, most provocative advisors I've ever met in my life.
So I would argue that it's really important right now to be trying to assemble your data from the summer of 23 and the summer of 22, if you can, to be able to compare achievement growth for the students who participated and the students who didn't, and to use those data in the next few months to be making arguments inside school districts about using that final batch of federal dollars that expire at the end of the next summer to try to argue for dramatically expanding summer learning next summer far beyond the 15 or 20% that most districts are doing. And if that, and I think to be able to deliver on that, most districts would have to partner with organizations in the area, like as in Boston, summer learning is sort of a joint effort between the school district and organizations there. So I guess that's two pieces of advice.
No, that's great. And I have one piece of it. I'm going to answer my own question. Is from the federal perspective, how are we using the data, beginning to deepen our relationships with school districts and the CBOs and nonprofits so that we can look actually outside of the school district and those other agencies, local agencies, whether it's the healthcare services, our housing, the parks and rec, What are your mayor's offices doing? How are we all getting ready now for this coming summer, right? And pulling together those, not just federal funding, but the state and local funding that exists within your communities. And so with that, I would love to thank this amazing group of panelists. I think we did not achieve maybe Becky level, but we got there. Thank you all.
And so I'd like to invite to the stage Byron Sanders from Big Thought, Dallas. All right. How y'all doing? Cool. So y'all, I got a boot. And it's here because I'm 40. I was playing basketball and I thought I still had it. I ain't got it no more. And this is the evidence. I do have an alternate story. So there was a bear, right? But I'm really excited to continue this conversation. We have an amazing panel who's going to be joining us up here. Again, Reverend Dr. Right Reverend Becky Pringle, thank you so much for lighting us up. I have to also give that up as well. But we're going to carry this energy. This panel here are the folks who are out here in our states, in our communities, doing some really, really powerful work. And we also have the privilege of hearing from today a young person who will be joining us on the stage, one of the youths who will be with us. So with that said, we're gonna go ahead and bring up the people. When I call your name, come on and join us up here. First, we have coming to the stage, because we're going to go from this way. Actually, y'all go ahead and come up, and then I'll just talk about you as you're walking. How about that? Come on through. So let's hear it for our panel. In order of this way to that way, Mazzy Ingram, 2023 NSLA policy intern and student. She hails to us from Brandeis University by way of Philly, city of brotherly love, and the home of Fresh Prince of Bel Air. All right, next up we have with us Suzette Harvey. She's the president and CEO of Primetime Palm Beach County. Let's hear it for Suzette. They're a 23-year intermediary organization, after school, out of school time organization, doing amazing work. We were friends and colleagues, partners in the Wallace Foundation's Partners in Social Emotional Learning Initiative for a number of years. So happy to see you again, Suzette. Next, we have the person I cannot sit next to in church because we will be cutting up the whole time. Penny Christian, chair of the National PTA Family Engagement Committee from Lexington, Kentucky. Let's hear it for Penny. Thrilled to have you joining us. And then last and definitely not least, Paula Shannon, Deputy Superintendent of Tulsa Public Schools in Oklahoma. From the T-Town, we got some Tulsa, it sounds like we got some Tulsa people here. I'm with it. That's my alma mater. I'm on the Board of Trustees, University of Tulsa, so I'm part of the crew too. We also are Tulsa, so thank you all so much. We're gonna go ahead and dive into this conversation. So I'm gonna hobble. Here we go. Okay, so we just heard a great conversation about collaboration and partnerships and why it's particularly pertinent for us in this post-pandemic world. Now again, just a little bit about my role here, President and CEO of Big Thought. We're an out-of-school time organization based in Dallas, and I'm really glad we talked a little bit about helping the data tell the story of the impact that we have to have. Happy to share with you all the initial data that we have from our first real summer post-pandemic showed that every student who came to our big Dallas City of Learning multi-sector collaborative with the school district, the city, corporations, partners. Over 600 partners have helped build this. we were able to do a comparative study of youth who participated and got a significant amount of dosage in Dallas City of Learning, whether we were looking at their beginning 6 weeks term GPA or the end of year standardized test scores across math and reading at every grade assessed. Students who got that powerful summer learning did significantly better, statistically significantly better than students who did not get access to that summer learning. So if you want to talk about how powerful this is, there's power there, right? So we know the efficacy exists, but let's talk a little bit more about the landscape, y'all. You know, we heard kind of the macro view. We want to hear about what does it look like in you all's worlds in the work that you're doing now. We're going to kick it off because, again, the most vital partners are the youth themselves. Let's go to Mazzy first. You were involved with the Fab Philly as your summer learning program, so tell us a little bit about what that program literally meant to you in your life, and then how do you see the challenges in after-school space now? In what ways? We talked a little bit about safety when we were having our initial conversation. Talk about that as it relates to the landscape right now.
Sure. Thank you, Byron, for the question. So I want to start by giving a little bit of context about how I even found FabU Philly. So the program that I did with them was the Safety Captains Initiative, which was born as a response to the gun violence epidemic that at the time was at a rise in Philly and is peaking now. At the time, I was a junior in high school, and I was looking for an opportunity to be involved in making positive impact in gun violence prevention, and I was lucky enough to find FabU Philly. At the same time, we were in the midst of the COVID pandemic, right? And this was a time where a lot of things went stagnant. We were told things had to be shut down, we had to transition, change, all of those things. But what wasn't stagnant was the issues that young people like myself were facing, gun violence being one of those. So FabU Philly, like many other programs, took the initiative to pivot, to be innovative, and transition us into a virtual world. And yeah, it really gave me an opportunity to make an impactful change in the world of gun violence. From the learning opportunity that I had with them, I'm now currently a Cities United Fellow working on gun violence prevention. In a few weeks, I'll be in Atlanta presenting a project on root causes of violence in the city of Atlanta. So everything's connected.
Let's hear it. Let's hear it. Give it up for Mazzy.
To answer your question about some of the challenges, young people, as Becky called out earlier, a lot of the challenges that we were facing and are facing are a direct reflection of the deep systemic inequalities that exist in this country. And yeah, like every young person in this country from kindergarten to their senior year of college had to endure the pandemic. But we were also enduring then and now racial inequities, environmental disasters, world wars, all while being exposed to it at such high levels, because when we went home, we were learning on computers, stuck on our phones, learning from TikTok, so we were exposed to misinformation, and we didn't really have spaces and places all the time to discuss these things, right? So with that, we were also dealing with just the typical challenges of being a young person. So imagine how we feel, right? Like, we're having to realize all of these world problems, and we're being told we have to do something about it. So what is the result of that? I mean, we see it in the country's mental health crisis. So many young people are experiencing high rates of anxiety and depression because we're constantly being exposed to harsh realities. But I think the positive that comes out of that is that we're a generation that we're kind of tired of just being told what's going on and what's bad. We want to have a part in making things change. Yeah. We are confident. We are confident young leaders, and we really want opportunities to have our voices not only be heard, but utilized as resources. So.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, they're not just sitting around waiting, right?
Exactly.
It's powerful, and that's what we need. Paula, so first of all, congratulations. Tulsa is a winner of the 2023 Summer Learning Award. Let's hear it.
Thank you.
Got the write-up all up in the book. It's beautiful. What are some of the things that are working in Tulsa?
There are a number of things that work. First off, I just want to give a big shout out on behalf of Team Tulsa and our many partners. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. It truly takes a village, and I think that's one of the things that's really working for us. So I'll start off. I got a few here. Partnership and collaboration. When we started our Ready, Set, Summer and expanded learning effort, we knew that it was important, so it became part of our strategic plan, and that extended into our second strategic plan. We worked hard to help early and before the pandemic to stand up a local quarterback organization, Intermediary. So our friends from the Opportunity Project are here, and we couldn't do this without them. They help us organize and collaborate with over 40 community-based youth-serving organizations to do the work that we're doing. So partnership and collaboration is key to where we are today. And one of the things that we've worked hard as district leaders to do, and I've said this a lot over the past few years, is we have incredible positional authority as an institution. Not a lot of trust, but incredible positional authority. We have a lot of resource, right? We control a lot of dollars. And so early on, we deeply believed that it was our obligation to seed the table, to help create a bigger table with our sets of resources, and to help put more seats at the table, but to collectively and alongside community reset the table, right? Like, we don't have to put the dishes the same way that our white ancestors on my side told us to put the dishes on the table, right? We could learn a different way to do it. So it's messy, it's far from perfect, but that's been one of the keys to success. I think the other is, and I'm gonna get to some of the data-driven things very quickly, but I think the other really, really, really important key to success in the situation we're in right now in Tulsa and in Oklahoma is courage. And I wanna applaud the courage of our school system educators, of our community-based educators, of our families who entrust their kiddos to us every day, and to our leaders. It's dangerous to talk about social, emotional well-being and learning right now in the wrong space. It's dangerous to stand up for queer youth. It's dangerous to stand beside a trans child and support them. You get to have your certificate revoked for it, right? But we have people with courage who show up every day and understand that summer learning is a primary space, and it extends the work we're doing in the school year, but is a primary space to really create the kind of safety, dignity, and belonging that each and every one of our young kids has or deserves. And so we have kiddos who are coming. So this year we're proud because our intensified community engagement efforts in our intentional enrollment of students, and particularly some of our most challenged learners, helped us enroll over 6,000 kiddos. They came 70% of the time. That was huge for us. We focused on a good balance of academic intervention alongside fun learning with relationships at the center. So we're not seeing the acceleration in reading just yet, but we do see that our kiddos who attended the majority of summer learning experienced much less summer slide in literacy, and actually we saw statistically significant amounts of math growth, and that's measured by NWEA MAP. We extended mental health supports, so those were sustained, and we have massive food insecurity, so we continue to feed our young people. And I think the relationships that were built, the dignity that our kiddos feel and that their families feel, led to us retaining close to 300 students that otherwise would have left our districts and gone to other districts or private schools.
That's awesome. Good things happening in Oklahoma, specifically Tulsa. Good things happening in Tulsa. So parent engagement, right? Family engagement. As we know, the pandemic shook a lot of our pathways of communication and engagement that we had come to rely on. Right? If there are folks out there doing the work, and I know there are, sometimes it feels like you're working 3 times as hard to get half of the people to come through. Sometimes. Really interested, Penny, you're a mom, and you're a leader in this national PTA. How do you think we're getting family engagement right? And how are we getting it wrong? And don't be shy.
Full disclosure, when I came in here, I had this all tied and cute. It's cold in here, y'all. Well, now it's a cape. Paula, I'm going to take something you said, because when you talk about having a seat at the table, my firm belief in this work, and as that person, as a black mom, as a mom of 4 black women, if they don't invite you to the table, you build your own table. And that's what I've found I've had to do when it comes to training parents and having families find their voice. But when you mentioned it's dangerous to speak on some things, I'm from Kentucky. We just lost our Commissioner of Education because he stood up for queer kids. He's literally gone. Broke my heart. This man. I digress. So what are we getting right? Quick show of hands. Who's heard of Selena Sloan Butler? Thank you, sis. Okay, 125 years, National PTA has been doing this work. But 125 years ago, it wasn't called family engagement, right? We're talking about immunization. We're talking about hot school lunches. We're talking about child labor laws. They spoke up and advocated for kids. We are an advocacy association. Selena Sloan Butler understood what partnerships look like. Who is she? In 1927, she created the National Congress of Colored Parents and Teachers. This is a black woman in Georgia who had a son. She said, he's not getting what he needs. She opened her own school, but that's not the beautiful thing. What she did was she said, there has to be a relationship between the teachers, our kids, and our parents. So she created this organization just in her little town in Georgia. And then a year later, she's holding a national conference with thousands of parents and black teachers. And posthumously, she was named a founder of the National PTA because she modeled it after the National PTA. All that to say, answering your question, what are we doing right? We're providing opportunities and resources and tools. What are we not doing right? The access to opportunities in family engagement lead directly to the access or the lack of access to summer learning opportunities, advanced classes for kids of color and other groups that traditionally you don't see in these advanced classes because those who fund and those who make the decisions don't bring us to the table. So as an advocate, you will always hear me say, I'm just gonna bring the table with me. It's fine, I don't mind. I'm gonna bump it up right next to yours. But we're going to have much better stuff at my table.
Thank you. Table constructor and transporter. We really appreciate that, Penny. Suzette, primetime Palm Beach. County. Put the county on there. Primetime Palm Beach County. Intermediary. Out of school time intermediate. Sometimes we throw that word around. A lot of folks don't fully understand it, but I know you all do a ton of the back end, the connecting. Big thought, we're in that same space. What does that look like? Why are intermediaries critical to the summer learning ecosystem, especially now?
So, much like Big Thought, Primetime, and other intermediaries who serve as connectors in community. What does that mean? We are conveners of our providers. We do training of staff, critical training. We raise money, we re-grant money, we advocate for the field. We serve sort of as the tower. So between the airplanes and the
air traffic control.
Thank you. That's who we are. And it's, one size doesn't fit all. We all do things a little bit differently. It depends upon the community context. So in Palm Beach, Florida, where I am, Prime time, really part of our work is to lean in to really maximize those positive experiences for young people who may not ever have the opportunity to have those experiences. And we do that in with a variety of categories, whether it's STEM, literacy, the arts, wellness, entrepreneurship. I mean, we run the gamut. And we also want to empower, but lessen the burden on the adult that's in the room with those young people. So last year, we were able to contract with 25 high-quality experts to bring 13,000 hours of high-quality learning to more than 200 programs. And that's a school year. And then for the summer, in Florida, it's real short, like starts in June, ends in the middle of August. It was 2,800 hours of high-quality learning. And we do this so that, and they don't pay for anything. So you ask me, what do we do on the back end? So we have a very rigorous application process for these content providers. And once they're in, the after-school and summer programs don't pay a thing. They just make a phone call and said, I would like that wonderful dance program. I want to do, culinary. We take care of the bills. We do all the billing. We do all the fiscal monitoring, the background checks, the fingerprinting, the training on positive youth development, the site visits. So we take all that burden off of those programs so they can take their resources and time elsewhere. So it really becomes a win-win for our community and for the funders who are entrusting the funds with us to re-grant.
Awesome. It's intermediaries or amplifiers of the capacity that already exists in the community, right? And they work in trust capital. I think that's also really important so that you're not airdropping something into a place, right?
Doing this 23 years now.
23 years, know a little something about it. All right, curb cut theory. Have anybody ever heard of this? Curb cut theory. So this notion that if you build something for the people who are furthest at the margins, you actually end up with a system that's better for all of us. Curb cut theory, American Disabilities Act. We now have curbs that are cut so that ramps exist for people to get on it. Thank you very much, right? First thing, but also who else has used a curb cut? If you've ever moved anything, right? Anybody ever had a refrigerators and curbs are not friends. So when we are thinking about how do we create ecosystems that are built for the most marginalized people in society, how do we do that? What are the things that are happening now as opposed to pre-pandemic so that we're making sure we adjust ourselves so we can get to those curb cut strategies that ultimately are going to strengthen the entire ecosystem? I'll start with you, Suzette. What do you know about the young people, what they need and want in your communities?
Well, they want to be heard. For us at Prime Time, we support primarily middle school programs to create and then sustain teen advisory councils. And then we bring those teen advisory councils together and we provide them with additional programming, but also just to hear what the kids are saying. And not too long ago, we had a youth survey. And what the kids were really concerned with by far was mental health. And mental health specifically, depression and suicide. I mean, these are the things that they were really talking about. Next on the list was their lack of emotional support. They're not having those adults that they can connect with. And the third thing that concerned them was discrimination, whether it was age, gender, sexual orientation, and immigration status here in Florida. Another example is that Prime Time is part of the Every Hour Counts, which is a coalition of like-minded intermediaries and organizations that are service connectors in our community. And some young people in our county were able to be part of this Powered by Youth Voice initiative that Every Hour Counts was funded by Mott Foundation. And as part of that, they had surveyed surveyed 10 other communities of young people from around the country, teens. And what came out of that survey is I asked them, well, what's most meaningful for you in your out-of-school time? The number one thing for the young people was the ability to have leadership roles. So again, they want to hear their voice. And interesting, the second thing was they wanted to know how to manage money. And to me, that's youth empowerment. That's their own control, their own agency, efficacy. And the third thing was social justice, which is not a surprise to anyone in this room. And additionally, we found out from that survey, they wanted safe, supportive environments, if we all know sort of the basis of what we do, and caring adults. So what speaks to me is a little bit of hope that we've all been doing this work, for positive and quality work, that we're getting it right. The children are telling us that. So those are my takeaways.
Awesome. So Penny, when we're talking about from a parent perspective and parent advocacy, how do you start to close that opportunity gap, right? And ensure that those resources are getting to the youth who need them most?
I don't use the term achievement gap intentionally. It's the opportunity gap. It's what you don't have access to, you don't have the chance to get. My girls, they're all out of school now, the last one just graduated. We insisted, her dad's an educator, we insisted they all took AP classes every time. They were the only spec in the room. So when we talk about summer learning, first of all, let's talk about it in terms of from an asset-based mindset as opposed to deficit-based, which is why I don't use the term learning loss. Thank you, Ed Trust, I use the term unfinished learning. Because, let's be honest, COVID just exposed what was already there. Becky Pringle, you were like, these same groups were treated the same way prior to COVID. So now COVID is being weaponized, so you can say, well, we can't reach all of these babies, and when the money runs out, what are we gonna do? You're gonna do the same thing you did before, unless I take my job seriously and empower parents and families and say, this is what you have the right to. How many of you had, at the district level, when you had this money flowing in, that you had, per the law, we were supposed to have a parent representative or some parents come in and say, here's what I want. You tell me what you want to do with the money. I had it happen. I made sure it did because I emailed and says, are you going to ask for your parent reps yet? And I volunteered. Because, table. But we've got to figure out how to get those who hold the reins to understand that if you take care of the outside kids, you're going to take care of the inside kids, right? So when I get in my feelings, y'all, because my kids, they had the mom and dad at home and all this other junk, but they were still black in this district that they were in. And they were still black females. And they still had issues, but they had me. The other babies didn't have me. And when you ask me this question, we've got to do better simply by holding those who hold the reins accountable. Summer learning is an opportunity to not just reach those who didn't get it, but those who long had it and haven't had opportunities to shine. So I think that's what we need to do.
Thank you. Okay. We are officially over time, but we're gonna do a massive, drop them. Each of you should spike your mic after you say the last thing on this one. It's gonna be good. Everybody get your phones out, get ready to record. So, summer we also know is a place for innovation, right? I want each of you all, as we close out, to talk about, in your most optimistic sense, what are the innovative things that you are doing or have been involved in that's going to help us imagine that new way of being for a brand new normal that can create the accessibility to the kind of experience that all young people need across this country in summer education. So we'll start over here with you, Paula, and we'll come down the line. Go for it.
everyone's a leader. So whether you're a parent, whether you're a student, whether you're a certified professional, a community-based educator, we're all leaders, and we need every leader's voice at the table. So if you're a leader with a big voice like mine, lean out and give others space. If you are a student, if you are a teacher who doesn't believe you're a leader, believe you're a leader and lean in and take the space, because it's going to take all of us to continue to provide the kind of rich experiences that our students deserve right now.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Brian, this is a really hard question because there's so much. But I want to borrow your perspective on the curb cup theory and talk a little bit about how that can be applied, right? A lot of times when young people are invited into spaces and places to advocate for themselves, they're asked to do it by themselves. Young people work better. Power is in numbers, right? Yeah. So if you are a program provider and you have a youth advisory board, make sure that your youth advisory board is working with other youth advisory boards. Make sure that students have opportunities to unionize amongst each other, okay, so that we can advocate for ourselves effectively. And pay your young people and pay them well. Girl. Please. Because when we talk about students being marginalized, when we look at the economic state of our country, a lot of these young people who are in these programs seeking support aren't just doing it for themselves. They're doing it because they have a mom at home who's struggling to put food on the table, and they want to lessen the burden on her. So help them do that, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much, my wisdom. Suzette.
So, I'm from Florida. So I just want to say, if we can find space for...
What y'all laughing at?
to have joy for our children, and compassion and empathy, and leave them space to explore and to discover all of those wonderful things that they can happen during summer in a time when it's so difficult. And the way that has to happen is that we have to support the workforce that are allowing that to happen with our children. So yes, absolutely pay them and give them space when they need those mental days. Lean into self-care. I mean, Byron and I were working on a whole project that can't be named now, that it's all about that. And, we have to find our humanity again. And so, lean into the joy.
Yes. Penny.
National PTA partnered with CDC on a study about summer learning. And overwhelmingly, the parents that they surveyed said that they wanted to have access to those opportunities for their children in summer learning. So the question is not why. The question is why not, right? So talk to National PTA website. Come talk to me. We'll talk about how to access everybody access to the summer learning opportunities.
Awesome. Thank you, Penny. And I'll end with this thought as we talk about summer as innovation. ChatGPT, machine learning, automation, technology is completely changing the world as we know it. But in a strange twist, because of the advance in technology, the things that we're seeing become most valuable for what a person brings to the workforce is actually their humanity. Your social emotional well-being, your critical thinking, problem solving, your creativity, all those things that are inborn but that need space to breathe, that's why summer learning is right there. So it's not just about standardized test scores in math and catching up on reading. It's also about building all of those things that we know are so important but that we just hadn't had a test for, but everybody says, I know it when I see it. Summer learning is a place for us to build that. We can start to call that out. It is workforce development. It is social justice. It is mental health and wellness support. It's all of those different things, and it's as vital to a young person's educational journey as the air they breathe. You all are doing that. We're doing that. Stand on that, and let's make it happen. Thank you all so very much.